Welcome to the Mission Advancement Podcast, where we talk about the importance of human connection, generosity, and leadership so that mission-minded leaders will be inspired to learn and grow. With me today is Angel De Leon with Mission Advancement. Welcome, Angel.
Hi, Jennifer. It's an exciting day.
Okay, it is an exciting day. Today is episode one.
Episode one.
Of our newly imagined Mission Advancement Podcast. And we're going to be just talking about what this is about, what our desire is for the podcast in this new season of Mission Advancement. So, Angel, why don't you kick it off?
Well, obviously, this isn't the first time we've launched the podcast. We've had a couple of goes at it. We did our best. And then we took our own advice. Like, you have to hire people to help you do it well.
Yep.
And so we made a commitment to up our game when it came to this world. And I remember the conversation evolving over time. Distinctly, there's a moment in my memory where we were sitting down and talking about what could this look like? What would be the angle? What would be the voice? And I remember that you spontaneously just spun into about a 2-minute run on what it feels like to be the executive of an organization, the decisions that you're making at that level, what that feels like practically. And the unique thing about you, Jennifer, is you're not just an executive, the CEO, but you're also a founder.
Right.
And what that means. And as you talk through that, I think we all realized that's it. That's the angle. That's the voice. And it's been fun watching you sort of process out loud to land where we are today. Yeah. So it's awesome. We're really excited.
Thanks. Yeah, I remember that too. And it's one of those moments where you kind of wish you had recorded because you feel like some words came together in a moment in a conversation, and it did feel like a light bulb was sort of going off as to what we could offer to an audience that I believe is kind of hungry for a point of view that I believe is maybe missing in the leadership space. You know, Mission Advancement, our podcast is going to dive into what we at Mission Advancement do and what we believe. But really, it's so much more than that. It's about really inspiring and equipping what we're thinking about as mission-minded leaders, which can be a really wide spectrum of people.
Sure.
You know, we work exclusively in the nonprofit space. And nonprofit leaders have unique challenges, and we're going to talk about a lot of that with different guests I'm really excited to introduce. But we also work with board members and people who may be in a mission-minded organization, which I think of as like, you're doing something to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And you could be in a, Coca-Cola manufacturing plant and be a mission-minded leader. So it's not about the mission of the organization as much as the mindset of the leader.
Of the leader, yeah.
Of the leader.
And I think that's one of the things I'm looking forward to hearing from our guests over the next few weeks and months, Jennifer, is we often find when we step into the room with these executive level leaders that there's a safe space there with us. They get to say things to us that they may not be able to say to their teams.
Yeah.
And I think the candor, that you'll be able to draw out of them in conversations like that. I think there's a lot of people out there that are sitting in those executive leadership seats that'll appreciate that level of honesty and, I'm not the only one dealing with these leadership challenges.
Right.
So I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and our hope is that it's helpful to the folks that'll join us.
Well, you said a couple things that I resonate. I think, first of all, we want it to be fun.
Yeah.
We love to have a good time at Mission Advancement. We like to build true relationships with the people we work with. So even in a professional engagement, many times those people are true friends to us, even post professional work together. And some of the people that would be guests on the podcast are absolutely in that category. So we do want it to be truly a fun conversation. But the other word you said was honest. And I think that's the other, for a leader. And when I say leader, I want to also be clear. It doesn't mean that you're at the top of an org chart.
Right.
This is not a podcast that's for CEOs. I mean, yes, CEOs, executive directors, I think can learn and be a great audience. But, my own leadership journey has been, part of my thinking behind wanting to do this. And that's, even today in my mid 50s, there's an element of me as a leader that still feels incredibly ill-equipped. The imposter syndrome is real.
Yeah.
And I don't know that leaders are good at being honest about that. So I'm really a fan of, getting leaders to really tell the truth, because I think it helps even aspiring leaders to better understand, what it looks like to grow professionally and personally, and truly like what it means to lead people, to lead strategy, to make decisions. And it's, first of all, it's not as glamorous as people think it is.
It's not.
It's hard, it's challenging. And one of the things we're going to talk to our guests about is the courage that I think leaders have to have. And that courage can be very difficult in many cases. And there's a lot of things at stake when leaders are making difficult decisions. So truth for sure, courage, is I think a big theme. The other theme that we're going to really look at in every episode is a theme of generosity.
Okay.
And that's, again, like a point of view that I sense, especially in the philanthropy space, that I really want to turn upside down, is this idea that there's a lot of negativity in the headlines, in a lot of stories that we read. I got an email this morning that, was kind of doubling down on fundraising is complex when the economy feels uncertain. And I've been doing this for 30 years now, and I feel like I see that headline every year.
Yeah.
Regardless of kind of what the economy feels like, maybe. And I just don't, that's not my lived experience. My lived experience is that there are a number of people who are innately and genuinely generous. And yes, financial generosity is certainly a piece of that, but generosity means investing in people. It means giving your time, like really giving your talent to things you care about. And my lived experience is that generosity is alive and well.
Yeah.
That there are so many people who desire to be generous to nonprofit organizations, to be generous to teams, in their leadership, things like that. And I just want to kind of dispel maybe what can be a gloom and doom narrative.
Right.
That I think we get headlines daily, whether it's on social media or emails that you may subscribe to. And I just want leaders to be inspired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That generosity piece, I think, is so interesting because, as you know, we live in that world, but it's usually in the context of philanthropy.
Right.
And personally, I'm looking forward to the perspective of how does generosity apply across the board? Because there's so much more to that. And, it is that element of leadership that's often neglected, right? You're looking at your to-do list. What are the tasks?
Yeah.
And yet there's so many expressions of generosity. You get out of this scarcity mindset,
right?
Whether it's finances or scarcity of time, and you look at what's the best investment of the skills, the experience, the gifts that I personally bring to the table as a leader, and how does that apply not only to my team, but how does it apply to the people that we serve?
Right.
So I love that perspective. I think it's right on point.
Yeah. So I think, just to kind of maybe encapsulate what we're hoping and desiring and planning for the Mission Advancement Podcast 2026 is to really have conversations with people who have really interesting lived experience in leadership and in this kind of mission-minded way of working and leading, whether they're currently in a seat or maybe have been. Because I want to encourage, younger professionals and people who aspire to leadership to really ask good questions, to be honest, to be vulnerable, and to understand that leadership is not about knowing the answers.
It's a great point.
You know, I mean, I'm a parent, you're a parent. I kind of use that as an analogy a lot of leadership. Like, I remember bringing our oldest child home, and I think every parent has that experience where you kind of get home and think, I cannot believe they let us go home.
Yeah, what do we do now?
How am I possibly equipped to take care of a human? And you can get all the advice and read all the books, right, and do all that, but at the end of the day, like, you're in charge, and millions and millions of people have figured it out.
Yep.
And I'm super proud that my kids are well-adapted young adults now. But leadership is kind of the same way. You know, my journey as a founder is very different than people who may have been recruited and hired into a role. But there's no chance that you sit in a leadership seat and feel like you have all the answers.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, I think, to be learned and for others to be inspired by that really is the honest truth about how leaders can lead well. And it's not because they're smarter or they're better or they've read more books or had more jobs.
Right.
You know, and, my personal philosophy is you got to get the right people, on the bus. I've read been inspired by a lot of other authors and people we'll talk about on the podcast, but it's definitely not a one-person job.
Yeah.
And it can be lonely. You hear that a lot. It's lonely at the top, and that's another thing I think leaders don't talk about a lot is the reality of being in a seat where you don't feel like you have a lot of places to go.
Sure.
To check yourself, to run ideas past people, to be honest about what you're struggling with. And I'm hopeful that our podcast will provide some encouragement and inspiration for people to find those trusted peers and advisors and to mentor, a younger generation into what their leadership journey can be.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Well, it's going to be exciting.
It's going to be a fun ride.
Yeah.
Super excited about some of the people that we've got coming up on our first few episodes, and just really hopeful that we'll find a voice and that people will tune in and find the conversations interesting and inspiring. So with that,
very good.
I guess we'll sign off for episode 1 and get excited about what's to come.
The inaugural episode.
That's right. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening to the Mission Advancement Podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you'll be notified of future episodes. You can also find out more info at missionadvancement.com or on social channels. Thanks again for listening.